Hello again and welcome to another showcase video, this time for my Orcs and Goblins army. This is one of my latest armies that I started back in, late last year, November if I remember correctly, and it took about 2 months in total to paint it all up, spread over a little bit longer than that, but essentially 2 months of actually active painting. This is not my first Orcs and Goblins army. I actually had one back in 2006 or so when I started my Empire army because I bought the 6th edition starter box, like many others, which contained both Empire and Orcs and Goblins. So I got my first little collection of orcs that way. I also expanded this army a little bit since with the Night Goblins from the Battle for Skull Pass set. But then I ended up selling it after maybe a couple of years, I think around 2009, because I really didn't play Orcs and Goblins all that much. It was very much a, shall we say, tertiary army. It was actually probably my fourth or fifth army at that point. I'm not quite sure. But I ended up selling them because I didn't really feel I had the space for them or the time to actually play them. But it is an army that I do like. It is kind of funny, as orcs and goblins tend to be. However, the old Games Workshop Orcs and Goblins are pretty old and hard to get at this point, and as such, I wasn't really feeling like starting a Orcs and Goblins army using those old kits. It would have been really cost prohibitive and also not looked that great in 2022. However, when Avatars of War released generic Orcs and Goblins back in November or so last year as 3D printable models, I decided to jump on board and get back into Orcs and Goblins again. So I bought a bunch of the characters that I wanted from Games Workshop, the ones that I could still find. I mean, they weren't really available for sale, so I had to source them elsewhere. But the rank and file models are pretty much all Avatars of War as a result. And I only wanted to have the generic orcs and goblins. I don't have any savage orcs. I don't have any night goblins or forest goblins in the army. Just the normal stuff. I think that those are the more iconic for the army, and I feel they fit better into the Badlands theme that I got going on for the army as a whole. So that's what I got. Anyway, let's start going through the units one by one. First up, we have my Goblin Rocklobber, which was from 6th edition. This is the resin version of it. Was a little bit of a pain to put it together, but I managed to get it together without falling apart at least. So it was a pretty quick paint job overall. And we have the Goblin Doom Diver, also in resin. It was also kind of tricky to get it to stick together because the parts were a bit warped, but end result is fine considering that it was pretty cheap. And here is a Goblin Spear Shaka, which is again once in resin. I really like the goblins on this one. They're very cute. It's like a small little diorama, especially with the guy sort of marching around holding one of the bolts as a spear or a rifle almost, giving a salute. And here we have the Rogue Idol of Gork, or possibly Mork. This is the forgeful version. This was a pain to put together, absolute pain. I had to glue and pin it so many times to get the parts to stick together. In hindsight, I should have used brass rods. I used steel wire, which I did not really put in deep enough in both sides, I think. So it took maybe an hour or so to get it to stick together, and I also had to use Vallejo texture paste just as glue essentially to get the model to stick down to the base. So he's actually just holding on there with that sort of PVA mix. I think it's some sort of PVA glue in it at least. And then I kind of did a bit of a simple paint job with some, different types of shades of gray and dry brushed pretty heavily with lighter gray and gave it a brown wash for a bit of, muck and dirt and stuff like that. But I think considering the amount of time I spent on it, it looks pretty good. And here we have Asag the Slaughterer, another resin version of the model. And he was also a bit tricky to put together. I had to do quite a bit of gap filling on him, but I am pretty happy with him, and I think the skin turned out really well considering it's really just goblin green with a green wash. Nothing more fancy than that. And here we have the Orc Warboss on Wyvern from 6th edition. I put him on a bit of a bigger base. It was originally released with a 50mm base, which is ridiculously small. I mean, this is a chariot base and it's still too small for it, but it certainly looks better, especially as far as balance is concerned. It's not going to tip over. Also, really cool model for the Orc boss himself, at least. The Wyvern is not quite as cool. It's kind of derpy, but it still has some charm to it, and I just like models from this era, essentially. And here we have first of the Goblin units. These are Wolf Riders from Avatars of War. They are very similar to the Games Workshop models in terms of style, especially when it comes to the faces, but they just generally look much better than the old Games Workshop models do. They were a bit tricky to assemble and rank up properly though, so bear that in mind. Also note that these models are scaled down quite a bit. Here we have a Goblin Chariot, Wolf Chariot from Avatars of War. It had an option for a third wolf, which I kind of figured out after I had already glued on the middle part there, so it was a bit late then. But 2 wolves are fine enough, and that's usually how the model is presented anyway. And we have some more goblins. These are just regular goblins with spears and shields, Avatars of War models as well. And here we have more of them. These are goblins with bows, also from Avatars of War. And my last regiment of goblins, this time with hand weapon and shield, also from Avatars of War. And here we have some nasty skulkers. The ones to the left are the Games Workshop models, but the heads are from Avatars of War. The reason being that when I bought the models, they did not come with any heads. So I had some 3D printed for them instead and glued them on, and they fit perfectly. You can't really tell that these are non-Games Workshop heads, actually, just looking at them like this. The right ones are the newer sculpts from Avatars of War. I kind of prefer the Games Workshop sculpts, even though they're very similar in style. But the Avatars of War models are really cool as well, so I'm glad I have both to make a unit of 6 of them, because I'm using the Warhammer Armies Project rules where they are a separate unit rather than unit upgrades, so you can feel them as a unit of scouts. And here we have the Goblin King, Grom the Paunch, who probably should be on a chariot, but I didn't want to paint up another Goblin chariot, so I made him on foot. He has been depicted as being on foot in some of the art pieces anyway. So I stuck him on a 25mm base though, because he's a chunky boy. He does not fit on a regular 20mm base very well. So he will just have to go to the side of any Goblin unit that he joins, I suppose. Also from Avatars of War. Here we have some Goblin bosses. The 2 on the left are from Avatars of War. The leftmost one is 3D print. The second one is in metal. Then on the right side, we have the Games Workshop Goblin bosses with 2 hand weapons and a great weapon from 7th edition. I am still missing the one with hand weapon and shield. Hopefully, I will be able to get it when Games Workshop re-releases the Old World models. And here we have some Goblin Shamans from 7th edition, mainly. That is to say, the left one and the middle one are from 7th edition, and the right one is from 8th edition in plastic. I honestly don't understand why Games Workshop went out of the way to release a plastic Goblin Shaman when they already had 2 good models in resin, and they didn't really do any plastic Shaman for, the Night Goblins or anything like that. So, yeah, weird decision on my part. It's a nice model though, but not as nice as the 7th edition ones. And here we have the first of the Orc units. These are Orc Boar Boys from Avatars of War. I do think that the Games Workshop Boar Boys from, what was it, 2009 in plastic are actually really nice, even if they are lacking a little bit in terms of armor for my taste. But they're very hard to get now in our production, and since I wanted the army to be cohesive, I decided to go with the Avatars of War Boar Boys, which are quite excellent models as well. And here we have an Orc Boar Chariot from Avatars of War. This one is quite superior to the Games Workshop one. I kind of like the chariot itself from Games Workshop, but the old boars from, what was it, 93, I think, they don't look very good by today's standard. So this one is a pretty big improvement in that regard. And here we have some Orc boys with spears and shields. Avatars War models, the bunch of them. All of the Orc Boar units, or Orc Boys units here, have their own unique banner to set them apart. Here we have more Orc Boys with 2 hand weapons, or 2 shoppas, and they have a big red banner instead in the middle there. And here we have more Orc Boys, this time with shoppa and shields, and another 3rd banner design there. And here we have my Orc R boys, which I just finished painting. They also have their own unique banner. These were released the same day as I was done with the army, but then I figured, well, now I need to get those as well. So I ordered these from where I get my 3D prints and painted them up. I received them yesterday and painted them up pretty much as soon as I could. And with them being done, the rest of the army was also finished. Here we have my Black Orcs. These are the Games Workshop models from, I think, 2009 or so. These are painted not with Goblin Green, but with Vallejo Dark Green, which is a pretty horrible color to paint with, honestly. I have bought their heavy black green scenes, which would have made a much better base coat. But it ended up okay enough in the end, I feel. Kind of fun models to paint though, lots of armor and some green skin, which is pretty fun to paint. The unit also contains 2 bosses. I have the Black Orc boss from, again, I think 2009, who's on the right there in the front rank. And I also have the Avatars of War Orc boss that was part of the, oh, I forgot the name. It's a discontinued set now, so these are on production. It was one of those Warhammer Underworlds boxes where you got, I think, 4 Black Orc models in them. The rest of the models are spread out across the unit. They fit in really well. Here we have the first of the Orc characters, not counting the ones on Wyverns. This is from Avatars of War, Orc War Boss on a boar with 2 hand weapons. This is actually sort of an updated sculpt of a previous Avatars of War model that they had in metal. I kind of, sort of prefer the old world version, but this one is still really good and much easier to find because the old metal model has been discontinued. And yeah, it's just a really big chunky model overall who cannot really rank up properly in a unit unless it goes on the right side of it, I suppose. Here we have some more Orc bosses from Avatars of War. All of these are also 3D prints. I could not really decide which Orc boss I wanted on foot, so I got 3 of them instead. I figured I have one with open shield, one with great weapon, and one with just a hand weapon, which is not really useful, but I mean, he looks cool, so why not? And here we have more Orc bosses. The left one is from Avatars of War. This is not a 3D print, this is from their store. It's made from Zeocast, which is what they are making their molds in now instead of metal. Then the middle one is from Forge World, and the right one is an Orc Big Boss with the battle standard. I don't have the Belson from the plastic kit, which is kind of and I also think this one is cooler than the limited edition 6th edition model, which I also don't have. Maybe we'll get it at some point, though, we'll see. And here we have him. Here is Gore Bad Ironclaw, who is the leader, the general of the army, on his big boar that I cannot quite remember the name of right now. But it was a really, really cool, imposing model, which is also kind of a nightmare to rank up, to be honest. But I mean, he's mostly just gonna stand in front, leading the army, in my display cabinet, so it's fine. And here we have Gurumlock and Gaspad. This is from Warhammer Online, Age of Reckoning. A friend of mine bought the game where this model was included, and because he did not collect Orcs and Goblins, but I did, I offered to buy it from him, which I did. I think I paid about $15 or so, which was a pretty good deal. Again, another model that really cannot rank up at all, but he looks pretty awesome, so I'm glad I have him in my collection. And here we have some Orc Shamans. The first two from the left are from Authors of War. The one on the board is a 3D print. The middle one is in Seocast, and the right one is the 7th edition limited edition army box shaman, which was only available in that box. It's pretty similar to the generic shaman from 7th edition that holds a staff and is missing all his teeth. This one is a little bit cooler in that sense. Funnily enough, I have not been able to get the generic 7th edition shaman, but I was able to get this one, which I think I only paid about I think $10 for him or something like that. It got a lot more expensive with shipping from the US and tax imports, but I mean, $10 for a rare model like this, can't really complain. And lastly, we have my Black Orc characters. In the front, we have Grimgor Ironhide. Then to his right or your left is Borget Facebeater, yeah. And to his left or your right is Bedrock Headsplitter. It's kind of hard to remember all the orc names because they're kind of similar. One interesting thing to note here is that they are very similar skulls. Like they all have the same leg pose essentially. And I am pretty sure that the sculptor for them actually used the same body for all of the characters. It's especially apparent on Badrock and Grimgor himself that they are using the same legs and the same upper body even, or lower body rather. Grimgor is actually the only model in the army that I bothered doing any highlights on, and he is also the only model that I kept when I sold my army back in 2009-ish. Because even though I decided I was done with orcs at that time, I felt that I want to keep him around as a bit of a memory because he was the coolest model in the army, and I'm glad I did. Anyway, that was the whole army showcase. Hope you enjoyed this one. Some of you have maybe been awaiting it for a while because it's been 2 months since the last video. It was quite a lot of fun to paint, even though I got pretty tired of painting, the regular orc boys and goblins there at the end, because I essentially just painted 120 of them in a row, and yeah, it wasn't huge amount of fun there. But they're done, and I'm happy to have this army. As I mentioned, this is not really one of my favorite armies, but I do think they are pretty fun, and the goblins are pretty cute. At least that's what my wife said. That's why she wanted me to paint this army next, because she liked goblins. Next up, I am going to be painting some more of my Dogs of War army, which is going to be not sure how long it's going to take, 1 or 2 months, I'm guessing, but I'm not going to take a bit of a painting break and do some other stuff for a while as well. I am going to have another statue video out also next month, which is going to go through all the statues I have bought and painted since the last one, which is quite a lot. So you can look forward to that in case that is something of interest to you. Some of them are even Warhammer related. Anyway, that's all for today. So see you in the next video. Cheers.